Hey, Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Kuf 100. Very short daf, a lot of big tosusim, so we're behind. God willing, we shall catch up today. So we pick up on Tzadi Teramid Bet, and we are Amar Shmuel. It is 4 lines before the lines begin to get wide. Okay, the first word on the line is Umam. Actually, 5 lines from the bottom for the beginning of Shmuel. 5 lines before the lines get wide on Tzadi Teramid Bet. Amar Shmuel, Kabach Uman, you have an expert butcher, Shakil Kel, and he made a mistake. Here we're dealing with sort of essentially malpractice, shchita. Yeah, he ruined your $2,000 animal. Okay, he shechted it and he slipped. It wasn't a treifa, he slipped. Chayav l'shalem, he has to pay. Now we are finally getting back to the Mishnah. Because if you remember, the Mishnah said you gave Umnin something to fix and they ruined it, or a builder something to fix and he ruined it, he has to pay. So the question is, we had a whole discussion about whether he owns the improvement before he's given it to you. And does he have to pay for the base, or does he have to pay even for what he improved? Okay, but now we're turning to the real focus of the Mishnah. And the key question the Mishnah never addressed, just said, if a craftsman ruins it, he has to pay. Well, was he negligent or not negligent? How do you assess negligence, right? So now we're going to finally start to deal with that. So he says if an expert, now the reason he emphasizes expert, which is not clear in the Mishnah, although you might imagine that anybody who's doing this trade and anybody who's putting their hand on a $10,000 animal knows what they're doing. But the more it's emphasized that this person is an expert, then the more you should assume that anything that happens is like a freak event, right? I mean, nobody is perfect. Right. So, but if you have somebody who's a real, has a lot of experience, a real expert or whatever, there should be a general presumption that he wasn't negligent. Doesn't mean that there's not a slip, but that could happen without negligence. But he says no. So let's take a look. So he says, he's chayiv. I don't care that he's an uman. Okay, that he's a expert. Okay, maziku posheyahu. He's a mazik, he was negligent, can't say it was an accident, it was an act of God. And you can't say, I was just doing what the Balabais asked. No, he asked you to do it correctly. It's as if he said, shech, as if he asked you to shech from the neck and you shechted from the back of the neck. Okay, just because you were under the instruction of the Balabais doesn't mean that when you make a mistake, you're doing his bidding, okay? So you're negligent, you have to pay. Okay, so the key point though here is there's 2 questions that we're going to be dealing with. Question number 1 is, what is required to make somebody liable to pay? Do you need negligence, or do we say like an adam mazik, why do you need negligence? You destroyed my object. Before we said that even if you're an honest, you have to pay. So one is what is needed. Is negligence needed? The other is assessing whether it was present or not. So Shmuel here says both. You need negligence, and we should assume that when there was this trip up, that it was due to negligence, even if the guy's an expert. All right, so that's Shmuel's statement. So now the Gemara says, maziku posheyahu. Why does he have to say he's a mazik, he's a posheya? Just say he's a mazik. No, maziku, if you just say he's a mazik, maybe that means that it's not gross negligence. Maybe that's only if you pay him. Meaning, the more that he's an expert, right, the more that you should assume that a mistake that happens is not due to negligence. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the more that you pay him, the more it heightens his degree of responsibility. It doesn't make him any more expert. It makes him more responsible. It should lower the threshold of what you need in order to be liable. Okay, you're being paid, that creates an added responsibility. Now, one way of framing this is, I give you my object and I'm paying you, you're a shomer sachar. But it doesn't seem like we're being the guy paid because as a shomer, right? As a guardian, that he's chayav because he's a mazik. But nevertheless, the degree of care he has to demonstrate while dealing with the animal, dealing with the object you gave him, the more you pay him, the higher degree of responsibility. So if he had just said he's a mazik, I would have said, well, okay, he's not negligent, but if he's being paid, he has a higher degree of responsibility. Okay, I would have said, if he's doing it with a fee, then maybe, he's maybe not an honest, but he's not a posheya, maybe he's somewhere in the middle, and if you're paying him, then he's liable. If he's doing it for free, so he Low, I would say in that case, he doesn't have heightened responsibility, and he's only would be chayiv if he's negligent. And maybe I should assume he's not negligent. He is an expert after all. Kamash Balan Poshehu. No, I'm sorry. I consider that. Shmuel says I consider any trip up, any mistake to be negligence. Now, one does wonder. Is it negligent because genuinely, like, as the act I was doing this, I was somehow distracted or being sloppy? Or is somehow the negligence part of the fact that I am, because I'm in the trade and because I am agreeing to do the job, sort of what defines negligence and the degree of care that I have to demonstrate, just makes even smaller things, within that context considered negligent. If you've got a doctor who's doing surgery and doing an operation, right? What it would require for me to be negligent to try to do a surgery would be to pick up a scalpel, okay? But what would require for a doctor, even a tiny thing, I said 2 cc's and I meant 0.2 cc's, well, excuse me, that's like gross negligent for somebody who is a professional doctor. Right, so the definition of negligence, the same way the threshold can, change if I'm paying him, the threshold can change if you're an expert and you're dealing with something that, $2,000 cow, you're dealing with a human life. That could change the definition of what's considered to be negligence. But Shmuel hasn't said any of that. All he said is, I don't care that you're an expert and I don't care that you aren't being paid. This is a negligent and you're liable to pay.
So we have that dynamic in sort of transparencies around risk. You want me to check this bull? Well, I just want you to know he's got a particularly thick neck, so the chances that I might not actually do the shechita properly is a little bit higher. So I just want you to know. Do you still want me to go?
Right. So I'm sure if you said that would
also is like, well,
that's a good point.
Do this operation, but you should know there's a heightened risk of infection. Do you still want me to do it?
Right.
So then all of a sudden,
that's a very good point. Right. To wait to inform somebody of the risks and have the person assume the risks. Right. That's a very good point, which has not been.
So the Talmud doesn't know about that necessarily right here.
Right. That is a good point. Now, the other thing that I want to say is, as we continue this, is since we're dealing with an Adam Hamazik, why do you need to talk about the fact that he's Posheya? Who cares whether he's Posheya or not? He took my beautiful cow and he turned it into a piece of nevela, right? So I think I might have to take this. This might be my son's bus driver. Excuse me, it was the first day on the bus. Hello? No, not the one. Okay, then it wasn't. Okay, so the question is, hold on.
That guy was a Nazi.
Okay, so the question is, why do you need him to be Posheya? He's an Adam Hamazik. He destroyed this gorgeous cow and he made it a worthless piece of meat, right? He didn't make it kosher meat. That's just an Adam Hamazik. The mission, when it says that you give it to somebody to fix your box and he breaks it, he pays, doesn't say that he has to be negligent. So why is negligence needed? So you might remember that there was a debate from many months ago, or I don't know, many months, 2-3 months ago, Ramban and Tosfos, whether when the Gemara says Adam Muad La'olam, even in the case of Anas, whether the Gemara really meant it or not. Tosfos says the Gemara doesn't really mean it. You're not chayiv as an Adam Hamazik unless there's a degree of negligence, right? There's a continuum. There's complete act of God on us. There's complete negligence, and then there's this case in the middle called like Genev and Aveda. Not gross negligence, but not a complete accident, not a complete out of your control type of a thing. And Tosfos says to be chayiv for an Adam Hamazik, you need at least a certain degree of negligence. You don't need gross negligence, but a certain degree. And one of the proofs he brings is the sugya we're in the middle of. So the sugya we're in the middle of consistently discusses, do you consider this guy to be negligent or not? So Tosfos says, why do you need that? If an Adam is really muad la'olam, then it shouldn't matter if he's negligent. Ramban disagrees. If you might remember, the Ramban says most of the cases that Tosfos brings to prove that you need negligence, like Tosfos' example is that if you're asleep and I lie down and sleep next to you and you injure me in your sleep, you're exempt. Right? Remember that? So you see, you do need negligence because you injured me and you're exempt. So the Ramban says most of those cases, the issue was pshia hanizak. The person who was damaged was themselves negligent. What the heck are you doing lying down next to a guy who's asleep? Okay? But how about this case? This case, right? Why does the shochet need negligence to be chayav if it really is the true that adam muad la'olam? Right? That's the question that Tosfos asks. So the Ramban answers this in 4 words, maybe 5 words. But the Ramban says, Ein be'umnim, I don't know, we can count the words. Ein be'uman hatoa b'mlachto mishum mazik, or mishum adam hamazik. 6 or 7 words. That's his whole answer to this. A craftsman that makes a mistake is not an Adam Hamazik. Even if he breaks the box, and even if he turns this cow into a nevela, you can't classify that as an Adam Hamazik. Which basically means, yes, is it true that he did an act to the object and the object was destroyed? Sure. But an Adam Hamazik fundamentally starts by the fact that I had no right to be doing something to your object. Right, I was I was invading, your body, your property, your space. Right, that's a mazik. Okay, that defines me as a mazik. And then even if it was by accident, Ramban says a wind picks me up and threw me down on your picture, and it broke, on your iPhone, and it broke. Nevertheless, I wasn't there with permission. I wasn't necessarily in Russia, right? A wind pushed me on it, but the fact that I was encountering your property without permission, that defines me as a mazik. And then we say adamud la'olam. But the fact here that you gave me the task to shecht your animal, to fix your box, even if I wind up breaking it, you can't call me a mazik, right? You can call me that you would sue me for professional negligence, right? That's what you would sue me for malpractice. But fundamentally, my relationship to you and my relationship to this object is not one. I assume if I intentionally say, great, he gave me his car, now I'm going to wreck it, okay, the intention would define me. But as long as I am trying to do the task you assigned me, then the Ramban says you cannot call that mazik. So what are you calling it? Is it a shomer? Is it some other definition? Is it once you're negligent, then that makes you like you do have kavanah? Maybe that's a way of saying it. Until I'm not negligent, then I'm just doing what you asked, and even if it broke, I'm not a mazik. But as soon as I'm negligent, then I'm acting outside of my, sort of mission, outside of my agency, and then I am a mazik. The same way if I had kavanah, I would become a mazik. Okay, but the Ramban says the base here is your relationship to me and the object is that you have the right to be doing something with this object, and you're not a mazik, and that's why we need pshia even in order to make you liable. Yes.
It sounds related to the conversation about you allow someone to come into your courtyard and then they break your pots or something.
Right. So exactly, you let them in your domain, right? Exactly that thing. Exactly, and there's interesting questions, right? It could be once I let them into my domain, not only are they not liable for things they do wrong, but I assume liability for them. Right. So yes, exactly. So again, he doesn't spell out what the mechanism is that once you're posheya, the guy is chayav. Is he chayav of a special halacha called malpractice of umnim? We've never heard that halacha. Is he a shomer? My guess would be that once he's posheya, it's like he has kavanah. You could give me your cow if I take sheshach. If I intentionally, make it an avela, I'm a mazik. So if I'm posheya, I'm a mazik. But as long as I'm not posheya, I'm an uman. I'm not a mazik. Yes.
So that tension between mazik and posheya is I understand that. But then how do we reconcile the adamud la'olam?
Well, that's what he says. Adamud la'olam is if we categorize you as a mazik, then we say, it's like which part of Shulchan Aruch do we look this up in, right? Here an uman broke the thing. Do we say, wait, let me get down my Shulchan Aruch and look up Hilchos Mazik, or let me get down my Shulchan Aruch and look up Hilchos Umnim? Okay, if I'm going to get down if I see this as you are a destroyer of this person's object. You destroyed it, right? Then I'll say, then it doesn't matter whether you were negligent or not. But if my fundamental lens to bring to this is an uman who made a mistake, then I don't pull down Hilchos Mazik. Okay?
But why do we have to say lo'olam? Why can't there be some state where you're saying if a person damages something, they're either a mazik or posheya? There's no. No,
because if I don't have the right to be handling it, if I don't have this parshas umnim, if Ramban's example is a wind could come and push me down and I would break your thing and I have to pay you. So you have to underscore that there was absolutely no negligence there. I was a total onus and I still have to pay you. That's adamud la'olam. But that's if you're in the category of mazik. If you're in the category of violating this person's property, not out of any fault, but you're not fundamentally have a different role regarding this property. A similar question would be if I'm a shomer, and this is a little bit ironic, okay, but this is a discussion in Baba Metzia, which is you give me your barrels to watch, okay, of wine. And here I am, and one of the things I have to do is I have to move them around and transport them. And there I am, or maybe I'm not watching them. I don't know, maybe you're hiring me to move them. But let's even say you're hiring me to watch it. But part of my responsibility of watching it is, I move it and I have to sweep behind it. And in my process of moving it, I break it, okay? But let's say we decided that I was an honest. Okay, am I pater because I'm a shomer who was an anus, or am I chayav because I'm an adam amazik? And the Ramban says you're pater because you were a shomer who was an anus, and that's almost ironic. I was a shomer, so I accepted responsibility for the object.
But
at the same time I accepted responsibility, I had a right to be handling the object. And the fact that I had a right to be handling the object puts me in a category of shomrim. And anything that happens, I have to look up Hilchos Shomrim. Or puts me in a category of Uman. And anything that happens, I have to look up Hilchos Uman. Right? So a mazik is when I don't have a right to be handling that object.
It's very interesting that when you frame it that way, like I have a right to be handling this animal because I'm the Uman,
right,
or I'm the Shomer.
Right.
You didn't use the word ownership, but it comes close to like for that moment, for that task, in a way it's mine. And
yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
Right, though, right? But there's a patur. In other words, what allows me to be punished?
Right, I mean, I have a right. Right, you're not violating this person's, right. That's what I think it is. I think it starts with the fact that you're not violating. You could violate sometimes not due to your fault. Again, you could be put. Wind could push you down, but there was a violation there that makes you a maz.
Rabbi Linzer, I think it's in the Maltese Falcon. I think Peter Lorre says to Sidney Greenstreet, I didn't mean to stab him. I tripped and my knife went into
there you go.
27 times.
27 times. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. All right. So now the Gemara says like this. Okay. Eisvei Rav Kamma. I have to keep to my promise that we're going to catch up today. That was too much fun right there. Eisvei, but it was so important for me that out. Okay, second wide line here. Eisvei Rav Kamma Bar Guria Lishmos. Rav Kamma Bar Guria challenged Shmuel, who said that this shochet is a posheya. Hanosein behema letabach v'nibla. So if you give an animal to a shochet, and it becomes an avela. He slipped, meaning it wasn't a treifa. He actually slipped somehow. Okay, uman pater chaydu chayav. If he's an uman, he's exempt because then we assume that it was a freak thing. If he's a non-expert, I know what you're doing, giving a non-expert your animal, but anyway, then we assume that it was negligence. In no sense, and if you're paying the guy, whether uman or you're chayav. So this disagrees with Shmuel both ways. Number one, that an uman fundamentally is pater, and number two, that paying money, is makes a difference. Okay. So anyway, but you see that fundamentally he says an uman is pater, where Shmuel says fundamentally an uman is chayav. So the Gemara says, Amalei, he said back to him, La'achar mochacha asa. Is this rabbi who's coming to ask this question? 1 minute. How did it? Is this rabbi coming to cloud your mind? So 1 minute. I just got to remember how to put in the punctuation here. No. Also, Mir comes after. I'm sorry. So Amalei la'achar mochacha. You're coming to cloud your mind. That's a stupid question, which is not so helpful. It seems like a pretty good question. So another one of the rabbis came, Kamosivle, and asked the same question from the same Breita to challenge Shmuel. Amrlei, so Shmuel said to him, so now, that insult I gave your friend, now you should take that insult. Okay, that's a good way of dealing with challenges. Just insult the people who ask them. Okay, now, now we're going to see why he thinks it's a stupid question. Kamina Luchu Ana, Rebbe Meir, I was dealing within a Rebbe Meir position to say that you're negligent and you have to pay. The Kamisa Li Rabbanan, you're telling me a brisa that follows a different approach, follows the Rabbanan's approach. Amilo Daikis Mili, why weren't you paying closer attention to my words? Shani Omer, Maziku, Posheahu, Nazik Omer, Shchotni Mikan, Shchotni Mikan. So I was very clear what my reasoning was. I said the guy's a mazik and he's a poshea. You're acting outside of your license. It's because when you make a mistake, it's like you shechted in the wrong place. So what should you have figured out from my framing it that way? Man islei haisvara, Rebbe Meir. Rebbe Meir is the one who says that when people slip up, they're a poshea. By saying he's a poshea, and by saying that I treat a slip up as a poshea, you should have realized that this was a Rebbe Meir position, which Rebbe Meir we'll see in a minute. So it was you were being stupid for not paying attention and not figuring out that I was talking according to Rebbe Meir. So the Amar, Rebbe Meir says, it's your responsibility to sort of watch over yourself and be careful that you don't make slips. That Rebbe Meir, slips are not accidents. Accidents don't just happen. Okay? Accidents happen because you're not being careful enough, and therefore anybody who slips is a poshea. That's what I'm talking about. I'm adopting Rebbe Meir. Okay, now which Rebbe Meir? So the Gemara says, hi, Rebbe Meir. Where does Rebbe Meir say this? Ilema ha Rebbe Meir, the following Rebbe Meir did not. Kasho bala b'moser v'nabel fanav karoi v'yotze v'hizi. Now we get to do a little chazara on the first half of Baba Kamma. If the owner tied up the animal with a rope and it went out and it damaged the scoring ox, bein tam bein muad chayav, you're liable whether it is a tam or muad. Diva Rabbi Meir. So you see Rabbi Meir, even if you did a shmira, you're chayav. So maybe that shows you have a high degree of responsibility. It says no, that's not about slipping up, and that's not about your own acts. Hasan b'krai pligi. That's a debate of how to read the psukim. What level of shmira is good for a shore? That's not related to our discussion. Elohah Rabbi Meir, the following Rabbi Meir. Now we turn to the Mishnah. The tzva'o lo edom, but tzva'o shachor. We're going to come up to this. Shachor tzva'o edom. You gave it to the dyer to dye red, and he dyed black, and he dyed red. Rabbi Meir omer nosin lo d'mei tzmaro. You are considered to have been a mazik to his wool, and you have to pay him for his wool. So that seems a little relevant because they're actually, you're making a mistake in your job and you're ruining the thing. So the Gemara says no. Hasam biyadayim kolomine. There, directly with your hands, you've burnt it up, you've destroyed it. Meaning, what does it mean? It means that it's sort of, it seems to be there's a difference between if I'm doing a shechita and I slip, or if I fundamentally, it's like when you cut off, they have these terrible stories of doctors, sometimes they cut off the wrong leg, So it's like, if you put the thing in the wrong dye, it's not like in the process, there was a little bit of a twitch, right? That was like fundamentally you did the wrong thing, okay? That's like a different story. That's Yadayim Kolomine. Now Rashi's a little bothered with it, but he gives a different explanation. Rashi says, Shenit Kavin Lishanot. Rashi says, I know you told me red, but I think black would look a lot better on this wall. Okay, now that's very much limiting that case. I still think that there could be a case.
Both b'yadayim. That's the problem that Rashi.
I know. Right? So he's throwing in kavanah,
internal,
but I think that's a little bit too limiting. I think that you could make a distinction between there's a type of like a nitko, a slipping, and there's a type of really doing something else. When Shmuel says, it's like I said shechti and you shechted there, it means it should be obvious to everybody that if rather than shechting on the neck, you shechted a wrong part of the body, nobody would debate that's negligent, right? So if instead of dyeing it red, you dyed it black, nobody would debate that's negligent. You did a fundamentally different thing. The question here is if you slipped in the process of what you were doing when you were supposed to be doing. Yes.
And the question is that also negligence?
Is that also negligence? And do we say that a person has a responsibility to be so watching over themselves that they don't even do slips? Okay.
It's really interesting, though. It's not the same thing. You can't compare. Like I put in a personal order. I want this dyed red. You dyed blue. And you say, I'm telling you, everyone's going to love it blue. There's a difference between that and like it's a ritual thing. Like there's rules for how to shed.
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, there are rules, whatever. I'm not sure the ritual makes the difference. I think the difference is like if I say, I dyed it blue, but slip-ups happen, right? That's what? What do you mean slip-ups happen? How can you? I was right there on the sheet. It said red, right? That's not a slip-up, right? If it said, whatever, a little bit it burned. Sometimes things burn a little bit in the process. Again, you might still want to be reimbursed, but that's a little of a different quality. And that's what the Gemara is saying. We're talking about slip-ups. We're not talking about fundamental changes. Okay. Ella ha Rabbi Meir, the following Rabbi Meir. Now, we don't know the Mishnah. Nishbura kadavalo salka. It's nafla gmalavalo hamida. If your pitcher broke and you didn't remove it and the shards are there in the middle of the street, or your camel fell and you didn't get it to stand up, and then somebody came and they tripped on it and hurt themselves, is that your bore? Did you make this bore with negligence? Right. Is the fact that you have broken shards, is that considered to have been an act of negligence on your part? So Rabbi Meir Omer chayiv b'niskan, you are chayiv if they do damage. No, you're exempt in human court, only chayiv in heavenly court. The Kaimalan, and we have, when we worked through this whole case much earlier in the Masechet, we concluded the debate is whether you consider I slipped and I tripped and I broke my pot, is that an act of negligence or is that an accident? Right? That's an old question. Accidents don't just happen, right? So Rabbi Meir says, when you slip and trip, I consider that to be negligent. I consider that you have a responsibility to watch where you're going, to watch what you're doing. Now, of course, it could all make a big difference, right? There are people who trip over their own 2 feet on a flat type of a surface, and they're completely distracted, not watching where they're going. And there's the type of thing when I'm shechting, and all of a sudden, I got a little twitch, right? You can't control an involuntary twitch, right? There are different degrees of slip-ups. Okay, but nevertheless, the Gemara is putting it all in the same category and saying, Shmuel says this guy could be an expert. He could completely have known what he's doing. There's no such thing as accidents. Any slip is because you weren't being careful enough. Okay, yes.
Didn't we say in this case there was a question of indirect damage, the camel or the shards on the road?
Yeah, but there the Gemara says the question is whether you're considered to have made a bore. Whether and if you can only have made a bore if the thing is considered to have fallen due to your negligence. Okay, so you're right. It's not an adam amazik, but it's still a question of judging: is there such a thing as an accident? And Rabbi Meir says there are no accidents. Okay, so now I mean, unless somebody else does it to you, but something that you do yourself, that's always because you weren't careful. All right, so now the Gemara says, okay, so that's the issue. We all agree that the shochet needs negligence, and the question is, do we define it as negligence or not? Amar Rabbi Bar Chanan Rabbi Yochanan, Tabach u'man chayav. So if an expert shochet ruins the animal, he's chayav afilu hu uman, even if he's an expert like Shmuel, ketabachei tzipori, even if he's like the most expert shochet in the world, like the shochtim of Tzipori, they were expert shochtim. I agree, like Shmuel, no such thing as an accident. Even any mistake, you have to pay. Did Rabbi Yochanan really say that? There was a story that came to Rabbi Yochanan in the Beit Knesset of Me'on. So somebody came and said, I gave this guy my chicken, and he made it into an avela. And Rabbi Yochanan said to the shochet, he said, go bring me proof that you have the mamchis, like you're a mumche, that you have expertise. Show me your certificate that you have. I didn't literally say certificate, but that you have expertise in shechting chickens. And if you have expertise, then I'm going to assume that if something happened, it was clearly an accident. It wasn't negligence. So you see, for him, if you're an expert, you are exempt. So the Gemara says, lo kash, it's not difficult. Kan b'chinam, kan b'sachar. It depends if it's for free or for fee. So that's like another issue we start. So there are these two different things. Number one, the more you're an expert, the more we assume it's not negligent. But now but the more you're paid, then maybe we'll buy into Shmuel's idea. If you're paying, then there's no accidents. Then you have to be super careful about everything. Okay, so he says if the guy is so when he said even if you're the world's best expert, you're chayav, that's if you're being paid. Okay, but if you're doing it for free, okay, then if you're an expert, then you are exempt.
Okay.
Yes.
I would think it would be the
opposite.
That if I'm going to pay you, if I'm going to search out the highest expert in the land and pay you.
Right, but that's not a function of whether you pay. Meaning, you're right. You could assume if you're paying, you found a good person. But where somebody goes can be determined separately.
Right. No, but I'm talking about the paying part.
Right.
I'm saying, I might think that a lower level person should be allowed more. Negligence, right?
Well, you mean because I made the choice to give it to this irresponsible person, and that could be my fault. That could be that I was wondering about. Why don't you say that if I gave it to somebody who wasn't an expert, so why do you say, look how negligent they are? They don't even know fully, they don't have full expertise, and they're still shechting this animal. What happened to Pshiyat Hanizak? What happened to the fact that I was stupid enough to give it to him?
But
so
he should have said.
This is beyond my level of expertise. Right.
Right.
I agree. But I was wondering exactly that question. Where is the fault of the person who gave it to have agreed to give it to a person without full expertise? That is a good question.
Right. Well, if I'm giving you 300 things of wool or more, 1,000 something, I'm like a person who. A factory person, right? And I give you a ton of wool to dye, and one comes back the wrong color. Is that the expected? Yeah, those are really good questions, and it parallels things that Dov was saying before about. Let's say I warn you about the risks that are present, right? So these things are not at all worked out in the Gemara, but they're essential to put on the table. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. So for Rabbi Yochanan, if you're an expert, you're chayav, but only if you're being paid. Okay, like Reb Zera said, if you want to make the butcher chayiv, if there's any mistake, okay, yaktim lo dinar, make sure to pay him. Now the phrase yaktim lo dinar sounds pay him in advance. I don't understand. If I agreed to pay him, does he have to get the money in advance? But maybe the point is that if you don't pay him in advance, he could always claim, I thought I was just doing it for free. Make sure it's a paid arrangement. Okay, if you want to be able to collect if there's a problem. Meisvei, I'll ask you on this. You brought wheat to be grinded to the guy who owned the mill, and the person did not remove the husks, remove the shells.
Okay, that's Lasisa. I don't know what the English word for that is. Vasan subin, and he turned the stuff into bran, or morsin, or another type of coarse bread, or coarse grain. Kemach lenachtam, where you brought flour to the baker. Vaso patni polin, and he made a bread that collapsed. Right? It didn't stay puffed up. It fell in. Behema letabach v'nibla, or an animal to a shochet, and he turned it into an avela. So all these things are, mistakes for the person who was hand doing it. Chayav mitnei shu kinosei sachar. You're chayav because it's like you're being paid. Now, the fact that it's like you're being paid seems to say even without being paid, right? You have, because you're an expert and you're doing it professionally, you have that level of responsibility and that level of care, and it wouldn't matter whether you're being paid or not. So the problem is it says kinosei sachar, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, you're only chayav when you're being paid. So the Gemara says, no, take out the chaf. It's not like you're being paid, it's because you're being paid. Okay, and yes, you're only chayiv if you're being paid. Okay, now another story. Hahu magrumisa, the asay l'kamid derav. So a case of a magrumisa, which is a complicated case, but it's basically a case of a shechita where there was a question whether or not the shechita was valid or not. It's a whole case that's debated about the way the shechita was done, and it's debated in the Gemara whether or not it's a kosher shechita. So a shochet did this, and the case came to Rav. So there were two questions. A, for that the owner wanted to know: A, can I eat the meat? Is it kosher or treif? And B, if it's treif, can I get my money? Can I get the guy to pay me back for my animal? Okay. So what did Rav do? Tarfe. He said the piece was treif. Upapre letabach milishlume. And he said, but the butcher doesn't have to pay you for it. All right. So milishlume dame, to pay the money. So Pagubay Rav Kahana of Rav Asi, Bahu Gavras, Rav Kahana Rav Asi bumped into this guy, the owner of the cow. Amulei Avid B'cha Rav Tarti. Rav did you he did you a double. Okay, so what does it mean double? So it sounds like he did two things bad to you. He told you couldn't eat the meat, and you can't collect from the shochet. So my tarti, what does it mean? Two things. Ilema tarti legriyusa, two bad things. First of all, he should have told you the meat was kosher. Reb Yossi, Reb Yehuda. That's the position of Reb Yossi, Reb Yehuda in this type of a problem. Number v'tarfik Rabbanan, but he did wrong by you. Number one, that he made it a tray for following the Rabbanan. The inalik Rabbanan. The second thing he did wrong with you is even if he was going to pass like the Rabbanan and say it was treif, he should have made the shochet pay you. So he did two things wrong to you. So the Gemara says, 1 minute, that can't be what they said to him. Are they permitted to criticize a psak like that? When a person goes out of the deliberations of a court, one of the judges leaves the court, right? And the court came out with a ruling, and he was in the minority. So nowadays, the Supreme Court, it issues a minority opinion. Okay, but the court, the Beis Din, has to speak in a single voice. So the court ruled in a single voice. You were the minority opinion. You were overruled. When you leave the deliberations, lo yomer, don't go over to the litigant and say, ani mizake v'chavirai mechayvin. I was trying to say you were innocent. It was only everybody else that ruled you were guilty. But what could I do? They were the majority against me. You're not allowed to say that. And this is said, one who goes as a talebearer and reveals secrets. Okay. So you're not allowed to go out and violate the confidentiality of the court, especially when the court is supposed to speak as one body. Now, there's a big problem applying that to here. What's the problem applying that to here?
They weren't part of it.
Who said they were part of the court? Who said they were that they had deliberations among themselves and this was a ruling that emerged from the body, right? Maybe they just heard the psak and they were disagreed with the psak. Right? What does that mean? If, David, you go to Dover and get a psak, and you said, what? He said that to you? That's not the halacha. I'm allowed to say that. I'm allowed to disagree with his psak. So it sounds like the Gemara feels that they were part of the deliberations. But even if they were part of the deliberations, you would think that there's a difference between if it's a body of a Beis Din that comes out with a unified ruling, or if, we're schmoozing in halacha and then you passed in some way, and I was part of the conversation, but I disagree with your psak. It's very strange, I feel, that the Gemara feels that they were not allowed to say this, unless the Gemara really imagines that this was a Beis Din. But who needs a Beis Din to pass in a kashrus case? So I really don't get it. You're allowed to disagree with psakim. But anyway, the Gemara says they could not have been criticizing Rav like that. Ella, Tarti Lamal Yusa. No, they were saying the opposite. Rav did you a double good. You should be happy with Rav's socks. He did two good things for you. Why did he do two good things for you? Number one, he didn't make you eat this meat that, according to many, is treif. He was saving you from that ritual isser. And number two, and he didn't make you, and he didn't want to tell the guy to pay. Why would it be a safek zeh? Because you understand, if the meat was kosher, he wouldn't have to pay you. So Rabbi is saying, don't eat it l'chumra. It's not varay treif. It might be treif, so don't eat it. But since it might be kosher, you can't make the shochet pay you. So look how good Rabbi is doing to you. He's saving you from the isser of treifa, and he's saving you from the isser of gzela. Okay, now of course you could say that if the accepted psak in this case is to say it's usher, even if the accepted psak to say it's usher misafek, that the shochet still made a mistake that led to a meat that couldn't be eaten. But maybe not. Maybe since there are other people that say the meat is kosher, and if you go to them, they would say it's kosher. So you can't make the shochet pay. And Rabbi is sort of saying you got to play it safe in both ways. Okay, so now the Gemara continues.
You don't make the shochet pay because
it might be kosher.
It might be kosher.
Okay.
Right.
So now the Gemara says like this. Okay, itma. Now we're going to switch to a case of not shchita where there's an obvious damage to the object. The food is now a piece of nevela, and we're going to deal with somebody who gives you bad professional advice. Okay, like your lawyer gives you bad professional advice, but here it's going to be a money check.
Itmar goes to re-quote something that's already
No, it's a new thing.
Yeah, it's always a new thing.
Yeah,
it's always a new thing.
Yeah. Okay, Gufa or Amamar is
That's
going
right,
back.
that's
Okay, Itmar. Amar Edina L'Shuchani. Somebody shows a coin to a money exchanger, which basically is Joe here wants to buy my cow, and he gives me some 10 gold coins. But I'm not sure that these gold coins are they authentic? Are they forgeries? Do they have the full amount of weight? Will other merchants accept them? They're a little damaged. So I go over to David and I say, David, here are the coins. Are these coins like acceptable currency? And David says, yeah, they're fine. And I accept it from Joe. I sell him my cow. And then I try to use the coins in a store and they get rejected. Can I go to David and say, David, you made me accept this currency, which isn't good. I want you to pay me back. Okay? So I'm going to sue you. You didn't damage anything, but your bad professional advice caused me a loss. All right? So Itma. Hamar ed dino l'shuchani. You show a coin to a money trader. Benim sarat, and it turns out that it's a non-acceptable coin when you went and then tried to spend it. Tani chada uman pater had yochayev. So we have one that says the difference again between expert and a non-expert. An expert is exempt. Every now and then people will make mistakes. It's seen as not a negligence. But a hedyot is chayev. The Tanya idach beinu and ben hedyot chayev. And another one says no, even an uman is chayev. So this seems to be the debate before. Do we assume that the mistakes that an expert makes are negligent or not, have a degree of negligence? Okay, so this is the debate whether everybody agrees a hedyot is chayev. The question is an uman chayev? Amar of Papa kitanya uman pater. Now, when did we say an uman was exempt? Okay, go danku v'isser. Like these two money traders, danku and isser, they have nothing left to learn. Okay, they are the top of their field. Okay, you cannot say to them that they should have known some more fact or had some skill that they didn't have. So that's a case where I'll say, because you're such an uman, there's no negligence. Okay, Ella b'ma. So the Gemara says, if that's true, if they were so knowledgeable, then how did they make a mistake? Ella b'ma, what was the mistake they made? If it wasn't that there was some information they didn't know, they made a mistake that there was just today new coins were minted. And somehow the old coins were now less valuable. But somehow that word didn't get to them yet. Now you could say, hey, if that's your business and you're the experts in the field, you should be knowing before anybody else when the new coins are being minted. But whatever it is, the Gemara says that they are total experts and they just didn't have a new piece of data, which that we can understand, that's a legitimate, that's like an honest. Okay, but basically he's saying fundamentally even an uman is chayev. If there's any more, anybody that is a hair shy of being perfect, that's considered to be your fault and your chayev. The who started enough in Tute Sichsa, and it was at that moment that the coin was just minted, and that's why they made the mistake. Okay, but basically, other than the world's best experts, okay, this is basically the Shmuel position that even an uman is chayev. The woman, she showed her dinar that somebody was paying her to Rabbi Chia and said, can I accept this coin? So Amar he said, yes, it's a good coin, you can accept it. The next day she came to and said, lay, and she said to him, "It's chazite v'amrli bishu." I showed it to the person, to a storekeeper, somebody I wanted to use it with, and he told me it was a bad coin. So v'lo karnafikli, and he wouldn't accept it from me. So Amalei Rav, so Rabbi Chia said to Rav, who was like his attendant or his student, fine, go ahead, take the coin, give her another one in exchange. Okay, basically he was willing to pay for the loss. Okay, because of a pinkasi, and write in my notebook, Dain Isak Bish. This was like, it's a write-off. This was a bad deal. This was a bad business. And Rav says it was a bad business because Rav says, Rashi says, look at Rashi bottom of the very last two lines. Like, what was I doing getting involved in looking at somebody's coins? Like I say, you know what, go show that to the money changer. I'm in the middle of teaching a shiur here. Okay, so I thought I was doing somebody a tova, and I'm now, by the way, it shows he's a hedyot, right? This might be a case of a hedyot, and that's why he's chayav. The woman is still a debated issue. Okay. Umayshna dankuv isa teptiri, mishum, oh, excuse me, I just made a mistake. He wasn't a hedyot. Right, the next line actually says that Rabbi Chia was actually an expert. Okay, so Rabbi Chia apparently was an expert a coin trader. So if he's an expert coin trader, why is he liable? So the Gemara says, if we said top level experts are exempt, because there's nothing left for them to learn, so we really do assume it's a freak case. So the Gemara says Rabbi Chia, apparently that was his business, and he also was an expert. Rabbi Chia also didn't have anything to learn about the trade, meaning not because he didn't have anything to learn about Torah. He didn't have anything left to learn about the trade. Apparently he was a real expert in this, a total top-level expert. So why was he liable? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Chia, you're right. Really, look, this lady was complaining and saying it's your fault. Technically he was exempt, but he didn't want anybody to have any tightness against him. And he therefore was doing it, and that's maybe why I said this is a write-off. It's a write-off because I really shouldn't have to pay her, but I don't want her to be upset. I did indirectly cause her loss, even though it wasn't my fault. Fine, let's just reimburse her. He went beyond the letter of the law. By the way, interesting insight. Why is the Hebrew expression of beyond the letter of the law, lifnim mishur hadin, inside the letter of the law, right? Everybody should be operating within the law, right? It's like beyond. So why is it the opposite expression? So the idea is that in I think this goes back also to Greek thought as well, right? If this is you're the human being, okay, and this is the world of the sphere of possible activities that you can be doing in the world. The law, conscripts that, conscribes. Anyway, the law restricts that. The law says no, you can't be mazik. What does it mean to? I know proscribe. There's also to like limit. Anyway, whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyway, you can't be mazik. You can't be gozel. You can't cheat. You can't do whatever. The law draws a fence around you and says these are the limit. This is the limit of your acceptable activity. So if you do beyond what the law is demanding, you're operating lifnim mishur hadin, right? So you're operating, if you think about it, so you understand, because normally we think about acting in an active way rather than like an assay versus a low assay. But the idea here is, this is the extent of permission the law gives you. The law gives you the permission to give this ruling and not have to pay. But you're further, constricting your sphere of activity. So that's the phrase lifnim mishur hadin. Okay, anyway, so we acted lifnim mishur hadin hu da'avid. Kidatani Rav Yosef, like Rav Yosef taught. V'udata lahem ze beit chayeihem. So, this is this is so amazing, right? Here it is Yitro giving advice to Moshe before Matan Torah. You got to just think for a moment about the audacity of that whole thing. God is about to give, the direct divine revelation from heaven. And here beforehand, Yitro is this non-Jew is telling Moshe about how to sort of arrange his whole court system. And not only that, but Chazal read into Yitro's advice that Yitro is sort of telling Moshe that it's not all about the law. There are parts of human responsibility that are not defined totally by halacha. Okay? So v'hodata lahem, you should tell them ze beit chayeihem. This is their house of life. What does that mean? Rashi says Talmud Torah. Otherwise, Rashi says it means that it means a responsibility that people have to learn a trade, which fits in also well here. Okay, so it's, you have to teach a trade. Et haderech, you should inform them of the path. Zumuk milot chasadim. It's not just your legal responsibilities. You have to do acts of kindness beyond your legal responsibilities. Yelchu, that they should walk. Zubikar cholim, visiting the sick. Mar says, isn't that a type of milos chasadim? So fine, but whatever. Ba, the path they should go in it. Zekvura, even a type of a, what the Gemara calls chesed shel emet. Something that there's no hope for getting compensated for, right? Or getting any type of, not just compensated, any reciprocity for, burying a dead body. Et ha'ma'aseh, the act, zehadin. Obviously, they have to do the law, but asher ya'asun, that they should do zuli flim mishradin. Don't just do the law, go beyond, or within the letter of the law, go beyond the letter of the law, and act presumably understood to be the spirit of the law, even if not what the law strictly demands. So yes, he did not have to reimburse, but he wanted to do the right thing. Now, by the way, Tosfos has a great question. Tosfos says that another Gemara has a case I mentioned before about workers that trip and they break something, etc. So there's a Gemara in Baba Metzia that had a case of workers that tripped and they broke something and they were liable to pay, and the whoever it was, the rabbi didn't want to pay them, Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. So he took their clothes, or he took their coats, and he was holding on to it until they would reimburse him for his wine. And the whoever it was, he went to Pask and says, no, they're actually exempt. So he said, is that the halacha? He said, no, it's not the halacha, but he says, Leman telech b'derech tovim. You should do the right thing, even if it's not the halacha. And then the worker said, we're starving. We worked the whole day. So he says, pay them. He says, that's the halacha? He says, no, he says, orcha tzadikim tishmor. Do the right thing. So Tosa says, why didn't it say lifnim mishras hadin? So this is a very interesting question. When is it a complete act of chesed? And when is it the spirit of the law, but not the letter of the law? So one thing that Tosa suggests is that here you were basically taking an exemption that would not normally apply. Most people would have to reimburse. Because you were an expert, you wouldn't. So you know what? You're entitled to the exemption. Legally, you're entitled to the exemption. But do the right thing. Don't claim the exemption. Okay, so that's a way of saying that's a lifni mishras hadin. That's a different than saying do an act of tzedakah, an act of chesed, etc. You're entitled to it, but don't claim it. Okay, he tells us there's other ways of distinguishing, but it raises the interesting question of when is it sort of this moral mandate of the spirit of the law, and when is it something that's beyond, above and beyond. All right, so now the Gemara continues. Reish Lakish, Achvile din Rabbi Elazar. Reish Lakish showed a dinner to Rabbi Elazar. Amar, by the way, you can understand why the rabbis like doing this business of money trading, right? You spend most of your time sitting and learning, and every now and then somebody comes to you and shows you something. Okay, I don't know how much, whether you got a fee for that. I don't exactly understand how the the business side of that. Anyway, okay, Achvile din Rabbi Elazar. Amar Mal Yahiu, it's good. Amar Le Chazi, note the Alecha Kasamichta. I am relying on you. Okay, if something goes wrong, I'm going to come back and ask you to compensate me. Amarle, so he said back to him, Kisan chazalai ma'alamemra. Oh, and it's nice to know you're relying on me, but what do you think you're going to get out of that? You think you want me to pay you if something goes wrong? You think that if it's a bad coin, I'm going to have to exchange it for you because you're saying that you're relying on me? Now we get to question. Until now, we've been dealing with the negligence of the uman, but what we haven't been dealing with is that there's nothing damaged here. It's one thing if I'm negligent and I break your box, or I'm negligent and I turn your behemoth into nevela. I didn't damage anything. What are you going to make me pay for? Indirectly, I caused you a loss. My bad advice got you to accept this, and indirectly, nothing was damaged. I'm not right. So what is that? That's grama. Okay, fine. I was negligent. I caused you a loss. Go make me collect. Go make me pay. That's grama. So he says, 1 minute. You want me to pay? You're the one who says that the only reason you pay by this case of the coin and the bad professional advice is according to Rabbi Meir, who's Dan Dina de Garmi. Okay, Rabbi Meir, who makes people pay in certain cases of grama. Okay, so that's why you would have to pay. You can understand that, right? It's the difference between bad legal advice and the auto mechanic or who ruins the car, or the doctor who kills the patient. You
don't have to take the advice.
But bad business advice is a grama. Right. It's not a direct act of mazik. So you say that's the idea that you would have to pay for that follows Rabbi Meir, the Dan Dina de Garmi. My love, Rabbi Meir v'lo sfir lan kavase. Shouldn't I infer from that that's only a Rabbi Meir position, and that's not our psak? Our psak is you don't have to pay that. Amalei, lo, Rabbi Meir v'sfir lan kavase. No, it is Rabbi Meir, but that is how we paskin. We do paskin dino de garmi. So this is important, right? If you remember, just 2 or 3 days ago, Rabbi had all these crazy cases about flattening a coin, etc. And finally, the Gemara pushed back and said, according to Rabbi Meir, you'd have to pay, at least for some of those. And here, too, comes Rabbi Meir to close a gap. There are cases of grama you mean exempt, but there are cases where there's real fault and liability, and and we exactly to figure out what's garmi and what's grama is major discussions in the Rishonim. But nevertheless, this comes to close the gap. And it is Rabbi Meir, and you do pay if you are negligent, and we pass in this way. Now the Gemara says, hi, Rabbi Meir. Which Rabbi Meir is it? Before we tried trying to figure out, Rabbi Meir is really like tough going. You slip, it's negligence. I don't care, you're an expert. Any slip, not an accident. Number 2, I don't care if it's grama. If you're enough to blame, it's garmi, you pay. Okay, Rabbi Meir really, has a consistent position here of making sure that people get compensated for their losses. Okay, so hi, Rabbi Meir. Which Rabbi Meir? Ilem Rabbi Meir Diknan, the following Rabbi Meir. Dan is a din, zik is a chayev, chayev is a zakai, tim is a tar, tir is a tameh, masha'asa asa v'yishalami beito. So you're a posek, and you basically said, this guy who really owed the $100, you said he was exempt, or the guy who was exempt, you said he had to pay the $100, or grain that was tameh, you said was tar, or tar you said was tameh. Okay, now the point is, a lot of those cases you could say just reverse it once you find out you made a mistake. But there are cases that then aren't reversible. You mixed the grain that was believed to be tar with other tar grain. Now you find out it's tameh. All the tar grain you mixed it with is now tameh. Okay, the guy you said was chayev paid the money, and the other guy who took the money is nowhere to be found to give the money back. So you basically made a psak. It caused a loss. It can't be reversed. Okay, this is like legal malpractice, but not legal as the lawyer, legal as the judge, judicial malpractice, I guess. Okay, so can you get your money back now that the guy admits that he made a wrong psak? Okay, so the halacha is macha'asa asui, the psak cannot be reversed. Okay, the yishalami beso, and you have to pay if you gave the wrong psak. Okay, now there you should say, if anything, first of all, it's complete grama, right? Because I didn't do anything to think. Like if you went ahead and paid the guy, I didn't take the money out of your hand and pay the guy. It's grama. Not only is it grama, but we talk about an idea of an expert and being exempt as an expert and so on. You would hope that anybody who's a dayan would be an expert, not necessarily though. We say that you could even there's a lot of things that even a head judge could don for. There's also like it's the whole joke about what do you call the doctor who graduated? The guy graduated bottom of his class in medical school. Doctor, right? So not everybody's an expert who's in the field. Anyway, so here you're paying. Okay, so this seems to be Stam Mishnah's Rebbe Meir. So maybe this is the Rebbe Meir of Dina de Garmi. It's only indirect and you're paying. Here it is, Dina de Garmi. So the Gemara says, no, Ha'imar Allah, it was said on this, Amar Rebbe Law, Amar Rav, who should not overnasan biyad. It's not you gave a psak and the guy went and he paid the other guy. You gave a psak and you went and you took the money out of Reuven's pocket and handed it to Shimon to show how definite you are about your psak. Okay, it's like, it's very interesting. Like sometimes because people are like uncertain, they overcompensate, So you wanted to show how certain you were about your psak. You ripped the money from his hand, you gave it to his hand, so you're mazik biyadayin now. It's not a grama. Okay? Elaha Rebbe Meir. So you can't prove it from that case. Fine, let's try this case. Another mission. Stam Mishnah's Rebbe Meir. Mitzvah lo edom mitzvah shachor tzvo edom. You did the wrong, dying. Rebbe Meir omer nosin lo d'mei tomorrow. You pay him. So you see, look, you caused a loss and you're paying. So there's an obvious answer. Hasn't kavid biyadayim. What are you talking about? That isn't grama. That's direct. So Tosh says, what was the havamina? So Tosh says the havamina is it took a few minutes after you put it in the pot for it to absorb the dye. So maybe you see that as a little bit of indirect. But nevertheless, the Gemara is rejecting that. The Gemara says, no, that's direct. Okay, Elaha Rebbe Meir, the following Rebbe Meir. None. You go ahead and you take your vine and you have it hang over your friend's wheat and you're going to make kilayim. Okay? Hareze kidesh. It's kidesh, but it doesn't mean holy. It means you've made it into kilayim. The chayev, and you have to pay your friend for now making his wheat not kosher. So you see there also, that's a grama. Somebody says it's not a grama. You're doing it directly. So Tosfos again says, what was a havamina? So here was the havamina. The havamina is, it doesn't become kilayim at the second you do it. Only after they grow together for a little while. So the growing happens afterwards. But the Gemara says, give me a break. That is not the same degree of grumma as giving somebody advice and them acting on your advice. That is, you did a direct act, and this naturally then emerged from your direct act. Okay, you cannot prove Rebbe Meir from that case. Elahar Rebbe Meir, the following Rebbe Meir, Tanya. Mechitzas hakerem shenifritza, another kilayim case. You have a wall that's between a vineyard and a wheat field. Even if they're right next to each other, if there's a separator there, it's not kilayim. Now the wall fell down. Now it is kilayim. Omer lo gidor, you say to him, build up the wall. He builds it up again. Nifritza, fell down again. Omer lo gidor, you say, build it up again. He says, and the guy says, forget it. I'm not going to keep on rebuilding this wall. Okay. Now, as long as he is trying to prevent it from being kilayim and build the wall, it doesn't become kilayim even if they're growing together. Okay. Tosfos discusses why, but basically because the Torah says, karmecha lo tizra kilayim. It has to be like you're planting it, like you will it. As long as you're trying to prevent it, it's not. But as soon as you said, forget it, I'm not going to bother, and then they continue to grow together, it's kilayim. So how did it become kilayim here? Not by an action you did, but by an inaction. And the halacha is, so it is kilayim, and you have to pay. You have to pay the other guy for ruining his wheat. So there's an interesting question. Why is it your fault, your responsibility, not the other guy's? That's not our issue. The point is, you were completely passive. The wheat became ruined due to your passivity, passive inaction, and nevertheless, because you're to blame, you have to pay. So it's a Mishnah, we assume it's Rebbe Meir, and this is the principle that Rebbe Meir does dini de garmi, and we paskin like that, and that closes the gap for things like flattening the coins that we talked about a while ago, or hitting guy's hand and then flying into the ocean, and it closes the gap it opens up a whole field of legal malpractice. You are now liable if you gave bad professional advice. And as I mentioned before, the Rishonim have long discussions. Interestingly, all of these huge Tosasim are not discussing the parameters of garmi. They're discussing other sort of tangential issues. But the key issue of our Gemara, what exactly defines grama versus garmi? What's the line between the two of them? Right? That's like major discussions in the Rishonim because the Gemara never fully clear.
Grama and garmi are two different terms.
Grama you're exempt from.
Right.
Rabbi Meir is not mechayev all grama.
Right.
He's mechayev certain types of gramas, which are high degree of causation, high degree of exactly what are the parameters. It's not clear.
Right.
But let's just make it a little tautologist statement. Gramas that you should be paying for, those are garmi. Okay.
Garmi grammatically, my
maybe
grama,
yes. Some say the yud makes it mean that you're more. There's some question what the yud is meant to mean there.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All
Well,
right.
also, could you